welcome back to Knits and Notions podcast with me, Kira. It's so good to be back. Fun fact, I did try to film this episode the other day, but Spicy, you might have seen I posted a little picture of it on my Instagram, which is at strangebun, that Spicy was sitting in this chair that's right across from me, just giving me the death stare. So I did have to take some time that day to just spend some time with Spicy instead of filming this podcast episode, which is like fine. Obviously, like I'm more than happy to do that. And I feel so bad for her sometimes because especially with school and everything like that, when I'm busy, I spend a lot of time at my desk and not a lot of time hanging out with her. So when she wants to hang out, I definitely try to make time to do that. But yeah, so that's that. But I'm really glad to be here now because I have some uninterrupted time to talk to you all about what I've been up to with knitting, crafting, and just in general. I also recently cut my hair, so I'm feeling very, very ready for the warm weather and feeling more like myself. Because I feel like I finally found my haircut. You know what I mean? At least for this period of my life. And so yeah, I'm feeling really good. And it is so warm outside. So this is actually, I'm realizing, my very first podcast episode that I'm not wearing anything that I've knitted myself. I just have this very light shirt on because it is already in the 90s where I'm at. I'll put what that is in Celsius because I don't know off the top of my head. But yeah, it's basically summer here. We basically skipped spring. I had a little taste of spring and now it's pretty warm. But yeah, that's just what's going on. So I was really excited to film this episode because last week I went and visited my family. So I visited my mom, my dad, and my little brother back home in Illinois. And I also went particularly to visit my grandma, my paternal grandmother, who is my last living grandparent, and who is having some health complications. She has COPD, so it's kind of one of those things, it's a long-term chronic illness. And as you get older, as some people might know, if you have a loved one or anybody who has COPD, as you get older, things progress, right? It's not really something that's going to get better, at least for my grandmother. So she was having some stuff going on, and so I really wanted to make time to go visit family and visit home. Because it is actually I think it's my second time visiting back home since the pandemic, but the first time that we went back home after, COVID-19 started was just for a weekend, so it wasn't very long, and I didn't really get to spend time with as many people, and I definitely didn't see my grandma during that time because obviously COVID was even bigger and more of a concern, and obviously it's still a concern, but I was able to, mitigate a lot of the risks by masking, and, I do that here, as well as all of the boosters and stuff I have, so it was really nice to get to visit my grandmother. But it wasn't just to visit family. I did actually get to go, my mom surprised me with a few trips to some local yarn store, and I guess a local yarn store, but it's a pretty big operation. So I'm excited to tell you all about how that went as well, because it was also some of my first times going to any yarn stores as, the proficient knitter that I've become over the past couple of years. So I've been to local yarn stores and things like that in the past, but never when I've been much more skilled with my knitting, and also not since I've become a lot more particular, I guess, about the type of yarns I use, and like more passionate as well about spinning and fibers and just like fiber content of yarns. I have like some more favorite yarns that I really like using, and so now I kind of know more of my own tastes. So that was really fun. I definitely felt so overwhelmed. So I guess I'll get into it now. But basically, today's episode is just going to be me catching you all up on what's going on with me. And then I'm going to show you what I picked up at some of the yarn stores, as well as some whips that I have. I don't have any finished objects. And yeah, so let's just get into it. So let me take a sip of coffee, actually. I was like, so let's get into it. Hold on. I need to prepare myself to talk for a while. So if you also have any beverages with you, feel free to take a sip now with me. This is a Starbucks vanilla sweet cream cold brew, which is my go-to Starbucks beverage. I just decanted it into this glass bottle that I have at home because it's really nice because it has this like cover. But I always get annoyed with like the Starbucks cups, right? Because they get so much condensation on the outside and it's dripping everywhere. Anyways, this is information that you all did not need to know. So let me take a sip of coffee and then let's get into it. Coffee time. Okay, so as I was saying, yes, so while I was home, I was mostly there to visit family and I was still working while I was there. So there wasn't a lot of time for me to do a whole lot of stuff, which I'm always wanting to go back home because there's a lot of favorite things that I have, in my hometown, in that area. I always love going to Chicago to go to like the Art Institute and things like that. I have a lot of really good childhood memories in the city. But alas, I couldn't do any of those things. But my very sweet mom wanted to make a point to still take me and do something I'd like to do. And that was going yarn shopping. And it was really sweet because, ever since I got into knitting a lot more and spinning, my mom hasn't been around to see it as much because it's been, the pandemic. Like, I live all the way out here in California and there's very rare circumstances that bring us together. And, I tell my parents and I tell my mom a little bit about, my crafting. I'd show them what I've been making, but I don't think it really hit my mom just how into it I am until I showed her what I know in those yarn stores. But yeah, so in preparing for my trip, obviously, I know there's a lot of knitters who do this as well, like yarn tourism, where whenever you go somewhere, you always look up like, okay, what are the local yarn stores that are nearby? Let's go. And so I did that too, preemptively for my trip because I was like, oh, I know I'll have, therapy and I know I'll have to do school. But if I have even just a little bit of time, maybe I can pop into some local yarn stores. And that happened. So I had looked up preemptively a yarn store called The Fold, which is in Marengo, Illinois. And it's a little bit of a drive away from my parents' house, but I figured, what the heck, it's probably well worth it, because I don't get to go to yarn stores out here that often. And I figured, maybe my brother would want to take me, have a little siblings trip, hang out. And then, so basically I had just decided I really wanted to go to The Fold. And I brought it up to my mom and she was like, okay, like, let's go together. And she was like, I guess, looking into other yarn stores as well. But I was just kind of like, I just really want to go to this store. And she was like, okay, let's go. And so we went on a Wednesday. I don't know why the day is relevant to y'all, but last Wednesday I was in the yarn stores. You can picture it now. And so we were driving, going along, I don't really know the area as much anymore. And so I was like, whatever. And we pull onto this back road, and I just noticed this giant warehouse. And my mom's like, okay, we're here. And I look up and there's just this giant warehouse, like I said, and it just says Wolle Company in the biggest font. And I was like, I do not know where we are. This is wild. And I was like, Mom, like, this is not the right store. But obviously you could tell, it's some sort of yarn, whatever. And I was like, are you even sure this is a store? Because it looked like I said, like, it's like a yarn, like a warehouse. It was in like a business parky type of area as well. So I was just kind of like, huh? Like, did my mom get the whole like wrong address? Did she go to like, I don't know, a yarn distributor instead? But no, my mom was not mistaken. She had found this yarn store called Wolle Company, which apparently, I was told by my friend Natasha, has a really huge online presence as an online yarn store. And they're massive. So apparently they have their warehouse and they also have a store in the front part of that warehouse in Elgin, Illinois. And my mom found it when she was Googling yarn stores and was like, we needed to go here. And so she just took me. And y'all, it was so overwhelming, but amazing. So I really wanted to share that experience here because, yeah, I don't know. I have very limited yarn store experiences, but I just had like the best day at these stores. And I also was wondering like how other people feel about these sorts of really big yarn stores as well. Because like I've mentioned, I'm not as experienced with yarn shopping in general, especially not as much as some of my other fiber friends in the knitting community, right? Like I'm a much more new to the craft, especially when it comes to purchasing yarns. Because like I've mentioned before, when I first started getting into knitting a lot, I was just buying online. And a lot of the online yarn stores I had no clue were also in-person stores. And so, yeah, so basically we pulled up to Wolle & Co. And I was just kind of like, okay, like, let's go. And I immediately started getting nervous because I haven't had the best experiences in a lot of local yarn stores. At least like where I've been. I went to one in Kansas. I've had much better experiences at this particular local yarn store now. So I'm not trying to like knock it, but I remember the first couple times I went in there and I was a less experienced knitter. At that time, I definitely felt like, I wasn't taken seriously and I wasn't being helped as much. I had since gone back and it looks like there's been like a shift in staffing there. And it's much better. So I like that local yarn store now. But yeah, like I've had bad experiences in the past, right? And, in craft stores in general, I know that a lot of knitters, especially my POC knitters, recount, like being followed in these stores, being, surveilled a lot more than other shoppers. And that's an experience that happens for, BIPOC people in general in America. And probably other places too. But yeah, so you can imagine if I go into a store that looks very fancy and it's a yarn store, I start feeling pretty like, oh, okay, like kind of overwhelmed, kind of nervous, not sure if it's going to be welcoming or if it's going to be more of a judgmental vibe, But I was quickly reassured when we went into that store that it was much more welcoming. And so I can only speak from my own experience, but immediately I could tell it was a different vibe when, I walk in and we were actually like welcomed at the door, which was really nice. And then once I was just kind of like, you know what, I'm just here to look around and see what I can see. And they just kind of were like, okay, cool, bye. And then boom, I was out the gates, like ready to look at everything. And nobody was like, I didn't feel like there was like employees peeking around the, shelves or anything like that, and it wasn't overwhelming in the sense like sometimes it can be really overwhelming when you're going into knitting stores because they'll be like asking you like, do you have a pattern in mind? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And I'm just like, I don't know, leave me alone. But that didn't happen this time, which I was really glad. Like I felt like I could just have free reign of this store, which is really good because I shared a few pictures on my Instagram, but like I said, it was huge. And it was overwhelming because of like the amount of yarns that were in there, but also because of the amount of yarn in there that were like really well-known brands and just like different types of yarns that I've always wanted to see in person. So like right when I walked in, I immediately saw a bunch of copies of Pom Pom magazine, and y'all know how I feel about Pom Pom. I'm like the biggest Pom Pom stan in the world, and so I was like, oh my god, they have like every copy. And then I was like walking over, and I immediately see Noro, like a whole shelf of Noro yarns, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's the thing. Like I've seen this online. And I've seen so many like knitters and people use it. I was like, I've always wanted to know how this feels, like what these colors look like in the flesh. And it was just like amazing. I was really dizzy. Like when I went in with my mom, I immediately was like explaining to her all the things. I was telling her about like Noro, especially because I think that's a really unique yarn company, and a very unique type of yarn for people who aren't like into knitting to see. Because my mom was like, whoa, like, why is the strands like not all the same size, and like why are all the colors like everywhere? And I was like, mom, just, it's so good, mom. And I was like having her touch all like the Rowan felted tweed and like Rowan yarns. They had a lot of like cashmere and really soft fibers in there. So I was like, mom, touch this. This is alpaca. Oh my gosh, it's so soft. This is blah, blah, blah. And like telling her about different fiber contents and like why each yarn is different. Because I think it's always funny sometimes with non-knitters. They'll be like, okay, like, can't you just get any yarn? Like, like what makes this yarn different than this yarn? It's the yarn. And I'm like, it's not just yarn. And we all know it's not just yarn. They're different. And that's kind of how I was too when I first started knitting. Like I didn't even know, right? Like when you're new to knitting, you don't even know the difference between like a worsted weight or a fingering weight and like why you would pick one over the other. You're just kind of like, I don't know. It's yarn. But those days are past me. I'm now so well versed in yarns. But so I was just going in. When we went in, I just like took a full lap around the whole store before I even considered getting anything, because I was just like, I need to soak it all in. It was so overwhelming. And another cool thing about this store was that they also had a computer just there for customers, automatically pulled up to Ravelry so that you can like look and find patterns that you like were working off of or anything like that. So I thought that was like big brain company move there. I was like, oh, you can get people like that, just like, oh, just look at your pattern here. But yes, so that was my Wolle & Company experience, and overall really good. But yeah, I was thinking like, while I love really big yarn stores like that, I don't know how I would feel about going them all the time. It definitely felt like more of a type of thing to do because, my mom was like, let's go. And it was really fun because of that, but I could see how, well, first of all, my bank account would be quickly dwindling if I went to that yarn store like all the time. But two, did I say a or two or one? I don't know. But, secondly, it's much less of a charming experience, I would say. It's very fun, but when we went to the second yarn store, which is called The Fold in Marengo, Illinois, I just felt like all of the warm, fuzzy feelings in there. So we pulled up to that store, and once again, it was a very unexpected entrance for us because we pulled up and it was somebody's house. Like, it was just a house. And we were like, oh my gosh, are we in the right place? But it had a sign out front, so it clearly was a storefront. And we were like, okay, let's go. And we walked in and we were immediately greeted by the biggest puppy, like the biggest dog ever. It looked like a German Shepherd, but I don't know dog breeds. And, people, their dogs are mixed just like me. So who knows? But it was a very big, fluffy doggy. Immediately so friendly, like the most gentle giant animal you could ever picture. And it's like fluffy and in this like such a cozy little yarn store. And, immediately was greeted by the owner there who was with two other customers. And I could tell just like from the way they were all talking, how passionate, the owner was. And like, I could tell, there's some older people in there. And I was like, this is so sweet and so touching. And what was nice about that store in particular was that it was much more spinning heavy. So there was tons of fiber in there and also tons of spinning wheels, which was very cool for me to see because if you have followed me for a while, I'm primarily a spindle spinner because I only have spindles. And so I've been considering for a little while, what it might look like for me to get a little spinning wheel. Because I've always, been considering like I want to spin more yarn and I also want to become more proficient with spinning and getting deeper into that craft. So spinning wheels have been on my mind, but obviously they're so expensive and they're such a commitment. So I want to think about it for a long time before I commit, as well as, saving up some money to get my lifelong wheel. But yeah, so that was really nice to go in that store and to just see a lot of fiber craft things, to see all the spinning wheels. We saw I think it's called a Maja craft or Maya craft, rose wheels, which I know my Instagram friend Linda Gray has one, and they're really beautiful and very pricey, but I can tell it's like an heirloom piece, right? Like you'll have that forever, you'll pass it down. It's a wonderful wheel, it looks like. I didn't try it out or anything, but it just looks wonderful. So I saw like that spinning wheel that I've never seen before, as well as like other really beautiful wheels. And so yeah, I'll share what I got in that store, but it was just really cool and nice. And one thing that was also really cool was that I asked the owner to tell me, about spinning, because I was just like, tell me all the things you know. Like, I don't know a lot of things. I'm always willing to learn more, and obviously I'm very much like an amateur spinner in terms of what I know about the craft. And she was like, just like down to tell me everything. She even showed me some fiber that she was carding by hand, which I've actually never seen carding in person. And I don't really understand it as much because I don't have like any carding supplies and I've never really looked into it yet. That's definitely a task for future Kira to get into, but I can tell it's a dangerous road to go down, in terms of, I'd probably want to buy like all of the stuff for it. So I'll let myself sit on that for a little while. But she was carding some wool with some dog fur that some, I guess, patrons of the store had sent her to card by hand and then give back to them, which I thought was very cool. And she was so patient with all my questions and like me looking over her shoulder, being like, what's that? What's that? What's that? I also asked her, what her recommendation for like a beginner newbie wheel was. And she mentioned Lendrum as a company. And so she also brought out her old Lendrum wheel to show me. It was a double treadle spinning wheel. And that was also the very first time, y'all, I've ever seen somebody spin in person. And so it felt very special, because it's such a different experience, like when you see it in person versus when it's like on a screen, because obviously it's 3D, right? I can like walk around the wheel and like get the full layout. I'm like, oh, this is moving and this is how this happens. And I saw her like adjusting the treadle. I think it's adjusting the treadle. I don't know what she was adjusting, but adjusting parts of the wheel and doing all the things and just seeing how she drafts, right? As this is somebody who is a very experienced spinner and crafter, I could really tell. So that was very cool. And I also told her I was going to Rhinebeck for the first time. And she had said that she previously went there, as a vendor, I guess. And that was also fun to bond with somebody like that. And yeah, so I feel like I've been talking so much, but that was pretty much my yarn store experience. And it was just so nice to get to experience a little taste of my, yarn fiber crafting community in person, because that's a very rare experience for me. I actually don't know anybody like in person since I've become much more into knitting and crafting like this, who's as into it as I am. And obviously I have all my friends virtually, and later this year we'll be able to have that experience, but it was just so cool to have that experience while I was back home. And it was just fun as well, having conversations with people in the stores. Because when I was at Wool Company, there was an older person who was telling me about the yarn that they were getting, and they had picked up some hedgehog fibers, like Tweety yarn, and I was like, oh, I've heard of that one, like it's so beautiful. And like we were talking about like summer yarns, and she was like looking at what I was getting, because spoiler alert, I didn't get any summer yarns. I'm buying yarns for just like other knits that I've always wanted. And she was like, oh my gosh, like, what are you getting? Like, what's all this? And I was like telling her all about what I picked out. So yeah, that was just really fun too, to just like have these conversations with people in person who like get it, right? Like, we're like, oh my God, yes, like I can relate, like that's awesome. So yeah, that was my yarn store experience last week visiting my family. All right, so apart from my yarn store experience, I was trying to think of like what I should update y'all on in terms of my life. I guess one thing that I've been thinking about, and it's more, I guess, particularly attuned to like my podcasting life, is that I realized like in the past couple of podcast episodes, when I do a little life catch up, I'm just so deeply like ingrained in like the school life, just like my grad school life, that I realized like I wasn't paying attention to other aspects of my life as much, in terms of like talking about it. But I think it said a lot about like where my mind space has been these past couple of months, right? Or like maybe this past couple of years, to be fair. And so, I've been watching other people's knitting podcasts, and something I love is just getting to know the person behind the screen, right? And that's why I started doing this thing, because it's just a way for me to express and talk about me and like who I am and what I'm up to, that isn't really as possible for me like on Instagram. So yeah, I guess I just want to talk about where I'm at lately, what's going on in my life as well, before I fully get into all the yarn stuff. But yeah, so I've been really thinking about ways I can start reclaiming my time away from school now that I'm about to graduate and school is coming to an end. And this is a very interesting shift for me, and I'm sure many fellow students can relate, especially if you're ending your academic career in some ways, right? Like, I don't know, I might go back to school later on down the line, get the whole PhD. Don't think so, but I never want to say never, because I said I was never going to get my master's, and now here I am. But I will say, like, it's a big shift, right? Just as a person, to be like, oh, like this thing that has in some ways defined me for me, it's been like 6 years of my life, probably even more, obviously, if you go all the way back to like elementary school, preschool. Like I've been a student my whole life. I've been in this very structured form of learning and academia and academic pursuits for so long that it's become such a big part of me. And there is a lot of fear and I guess some senses of loss that comes along with losing this part of who I am. And that sounds so dramatic. And also, if I'm like hearing the responses in my head of like my fellow social work people in my cohort are like, actually, Actually, social workers are lifelong learners, so you will never stop learning and you'll never stop being a student of life, which is true. But I guess it's just like, like leaving that structured little home of academia that becomes so comfortable for me. I know that it's not for everybody, and for some reason it's for me. Like, I would have thought that it wouldn't be, but I always feel at home, writing a little paper, doing some research, sitting in a lecture and knitting. Like, that's just like who I've been. And I'm just trying to think of like, okay, like I have to make this transition, and I want to just like fall fully into crafting, because there's going to be so much time that is no longer preoccupied by classes, by studying, by, stuff that I need to like turn in. And that is starting this weekend, because this weekend, y'all, is the first weekend that I am having where I do not have anything. Like, I do not have anything due. I finished my thesis, which is like, go me. I turned in all my assignments this week. I probably have some notes still to write for therapy sessions, but we're just gonna like take a pause, take a deep breath, and I'm gonna nurture a little bit of the other parts of my life that I've been neglecting. And so I have been planning my dream weekend in my head since yesterday. So yesterday I had a very big doctor's appointment, and this week in general has just been pretty stressful. The doctor's appointment is not really a big deal. It's just more of just like something I'm checking out, because my doctor saw that my platelet levels were high on my annual checkup. And some of y'all, if you've experienced this too, my doctor was like, hey, like, I'm going to diagnose you with thrombocytosis. You should get this checked out at the hematologist. And so that's what I did yesterday. And so just with all this stress, right, and like my brain gets thinking, because I start Googling thrombocytosis and like, what if I do have it for sure? And Google is like, cancer. Sorry, trigger warning for cancer. I don't mean to obviously joke about that. It runs in my family, so it's just my way of dealing with it right now, right? It's a little bit nerve-wracking, but I know I'm getting ahead of myself, and there's nothing confirmed. So yesterday I went in and was basically told I needed to do some lab tests, and they need to take more blood out of me to like test it for specific things, just to make sure I'm all on the up and up. And the nurse there was like, yeah, it's most likely anemia, and I guess this is how it can present in people. So I'm getting checked for that, and we'll see what's going on. So yeah, as I was saying, all of that to say, I have been planning the ultimate weekend, chill weekend, Kira and Aaron time with Spicy, just chilling at home. And I've been thinking a lot about gaming, because I have not been doing as much video gaming in recent weeks, recent months, honestly. And that's definitely a really big part of my life. Like, I've always been like a gamer girl my whole life. And video games are like a really big hobby of mine. And I've really wanted to get back to playing some of the games that I've had ongoing that I feel so frustrated that I haven't finished yet. One of which is Earthbound, which I've been playing that version. I think it's on the Super Nintendo, but I'm playing like the version that they uploaded onto Switch, right? So if you have like a Nintendo Switch, and I think you have some sort of like subscription with them, you can get some access to some of their like older games on other systems that they've made possible to play on Switch. Like Earthbound is one game I've always wanted to play, because I really like, I don't know, is Earthbound a JRPG? It's an RPG, but I don't know, is that considered a JRPG? I guess so, but it's not the same vibes, right? Back in the day, I played Undertale, and that was the first style, like, RPG type of game that I've ever played. I guess turn-based RPG is, right? Is that the term? I don't know my gamer terms, like, very well. But I played Undertale, obviously loved it, as many people who've played it do, before it just became too much online. But I still like it, and So I really wanted to play Earthbound because I knew that Earthbound was a really big inspiration for the maker of Undertale, Toby Fox. And so I was like, okay, I need to know like the OG. And I started playing it, and it's so good, y'all. If y'all liked Undertale, you will love Earthbound. And I'm probably preaching to the choir. I'm sure a lot of people who game has played Earthbound before because it's a very popular game. So I want to get back to that. And I'm also playing Legend of Zelda Minish Cap, which I know Jamieson Watts is also playing right now. Hey, but I have been playing it for a little while to show my partner Aaron the game because I grew up playing that one. That was my first Legend of Zelda game, actually. And he's never played that one, but he's well versed in other Legend of Zelda games. He's played like, all the big ones like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker. He's played Breath of the Wild. He's played all the big ones. I could name more. So many of them. I've only played myself. I've played Link's Awakening and then Minish Cap, and this is my second playthrough ever of Minish Cap. My first playthrough was on my Nintendo SP on the little game cartridge. And yeah, so it's been very nostalgic, and it's been a really great reminder of like why I loved that game so much, because the aesthetics are so cute, the gameplay is really fun, and it's really fun to also be showing Aaron, who's never seen it before, like, oh, like look at this one, it's so cute, and you can be little and do all the things. And so there's a lot of really fun like game play mechanics there. So yes, this weekend is the weekend of Gamer Kira coming back out in full force. And I got myself some snacks today at the grocery store, which that was a whole other saga today. I had the most chaotic day, and I'm just so glad to be chilling here now. But anyways, I think I've been talking for so long just about what's going on with me and everything like that. So thank you if you hung out with me and chilled. But now let's get to the real reason we're here. Just joking. But this is the reason why I was so excited to film today, because I want to jump right into what I picked up on my yarn extravaganza tour of Illinois. So the first thing I want to show y'all, which was conveniently on the top of this like little bag I have of all the stuff I got, is one of my favorite things I got. So I want to like drape it around my shoulders, like this like Britney Spears snake moment. This is a braid, obviously you can see, of roving, and it's the most stunning colors. So beautiful. So this I got from the store, the local yarn store I mentioned, The Fold in Marengo, and it is by the company Blue Moon Fiber Arts, which I've never heard of before. But if this was on their rack of a bunch of different colorful rovings, and this is a 75% BFL, 25% Tussa braid, and it's 8 ounces. And when I saw this, I just don't know why my eyes just couldn't stop looking at it. Like I couldn't stop admiring it. I think the emeraldy greens in here really contributes to that for me. And something about this time of year, as you might be able to tell by my outfit, right? I'm wearing a lot of blue, and I have my little knitted necklace by Hands and Curls, which I highly recommend checking out on Etsy, which is all my blues. And so once it gets into spring, summer, I'm all about blue. And that's very weird for me because, like I really like purples and greens and gray. Like those are my favorite colors that are most prevalent in my wardrobe. But something about it, blue is coming full force into my life. And so when I saw this, I was like, yeah. I was like, yes, I need that. And I really wanted to support that store, obviously. And they didn't have too many other yarns that I wanted to get there. And I had already done a lot of damage at Wool & Co. And so I was like, I need to leave the store with this, despite the fact that I definitely do not need more fiber in my stash, but we're just not gonna talk about that. Or we can talk about that, right? Like, I don't know. I feel weird about stashes just because like I haven't had a stash yet because I'm a newer knitter, right? So I'm still trying to wrap my brain around like how I feel about having so much collected up stuff versus being a type of person who like buys for a project only, But I don't know. I just like really like when I see a local yarn store that I really want to patronize and I really want to support, I'm just like, guess I gotta get more fiber. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that. So yeah, I'm just really excited about this. As you can tell, I can't stop talking about it. I don't know what I want to do with it yet, but I definitely want to try to spin it pretty thin. I'm thinking maybe like a lighter weight of yarn, because first of all, that's just the type of yarn that gets the most wear out here for me, because I'm living in a warmer climate, but also because I really want to maximize the amount I can get out of this braid. So yeah, I just want as much yarn out of this as I can. And so I'm very excited. I'll be updating y'all on how it goes. And so keeping with the stuff that I got at the fold, this is actually going to be a 2-for-1. So this is a whip and stuff I got. So I got 2 balls. One has a work in progress on it of Schoppel, I believe is the company name. These are Zauberballs. So for those of you who might be familiar with it, I think it's a very popular brand of yarn. And they do these like multicolored balls of yarn, as you can see. And they have a lot of different colors in them. They have like a slow color change effect. And these are their edition 6 versions. And so, full disclosure, I didn't actually pick these out. My mom did, because I went into that knitting store, the Fold, and I was like, listen, Ma, like, I want to knit you something. So, how best to do this, how best to pick something out for you is, like, if you just do it, right? And I really wanted to have that, like, moment, for my mom to pick out something for herself that she would like that I can knit with for her. And when we were in that store, the Fold, there was a big display shelf of all these different like slow color changing yarns and self-striping yarns as well on a display that just like showed, what these yarns can look like in socks. And so my mom wanted something similar. So she picked out these. These are definitely her colors, and you can see my colors in there as well. I think my mom and I have very similar color tastes in terms of really liking purples, pinks, greens, blues. There's a little bit of blues in here too. So I was very excited to get these to knit for my mom. And I found out, so these are Merino Extra Fine Superwash yarns. And I was kind of surprised to learn that they're superwash actually, because it doesn't feel super washy to me. And I don't know if I just like what kind of like super washy yarns I've used in the past. But this kind of sparks, a conversation for me, is that when I first started knitting, so I had always followed knitters online who were very specific about using non-superwash yarns, but I didn't really get it. Like, I knew that non-superwash yarns would obviously felt in the washer and things like that. And obviously superwash meant like, they can go in the wash and things like that. Because, for those of you who are familiar with the superwash process, probably more familiar than I am, I'm not very familiar. I just know that it's a process that the yarn undergoes to descale the fibers, I believe, so that it doesn't felt and do the things that regular wool does when it gets wet and friction and things like that happen. But for most part, like a lot of the superwash yarns I've used have had a very similar texture to acrylic in some circumstances for me, like that kind of squeaky feeling that you get, or they feel a little bit more rough and not as fluffy and woolly. And those are just the yarns I've worked with, right? So I obviously know it's very limited experience. And I know there's probably superwash yarns that are different, because obviously like these feel very different. They're much more fuzzy than I would expect a superwash yarn to be. And there's not much of a squeak factor when I work with it, and it's actually pretty nice to work with. And obviously it also works well for a gift, because I'm knitting these for my mom. So I, in hindsight, I'm glad that she happened to pick a superwash yarn, because I know that I just don't want her risking it if she had, accidentally put them in the washer. I don't want her to feel like super bad about ruining those socks that I knit for her. So it worked out. But yeah, so, like I don't typically buy superwash yarns. I don't actually really like the feeling of them, but I really like these. So I don't know. I could see myself working with them again, but it doesn't really jive very well for me to work with superwash. But let me know. I'm not familiar with this company. Let me know if they have a non-superwash version of these, because I love the slow color change aspect of them. And I love like how some of the yarns are like marled, and it's just so fun to knit with. It feels like a very similar knitting experience to me as when I knit with my hand spun, because a lot of my hand spun I do a like fractal color management thing with, and it's really cool to see the color shifts and different things like that, and it keeps the knit very interesting and potato chippy, because I'm like, what's gonna happen next, like what color is gonna pop out next. And that's also why Noro yarns have always intrigued me, because I really admire James and Watt's work, and the couple of designs that they have in Noro with the slow color change and their modular knitting looks so sick. So I've always wanted to knit with yarns like that, which is very fun. But yeah, so tag along with this stuff I got is this whip that I'm working on. So this is the sock for my mom. So you can see how this yarn is looking like knit up, and this is a little heel flap in progress. As you can see, I'm knitting little shorties for her. I felt like they'd be nicer for her. She does a lot of biking, and she likes doing hiking and things like that, but I felt like it'd be nice to do something a little bit shorter for her in the summer, because I knit her a pair of socks already that are like full length. So yeah, this is my Zauberballs. So now I'm going to move into some of the things that I got my little thingies on from Wolle & Company. And like I mentioned, it was so overwhelming. I didn't know where to start. I couldn't even think of patterns, right, that I needed yarn for. Because in my brain, I was just kind of like, okay, this is a rare circumstance for me. Like, I'm never going to be here again, for the foreseeable future. And I'm not going to go to many yarn stores until when I go to, or do a lot of yarn shopping, I guess, until I go to Rhinebeck. And I had actually had like a little bit, like, I guess this is a side note, but I had actually had a little bit of a official, unofficial yarn not buying time. I was gonna say like a yarn spending ban, but like I don't really like how authoritarian this sounds. Like I'm not banning myself from anything. I was just trying to knit through a lot of the yarns I've had for a while, because I let a lot of yarns sit for a bit, and I'm like, okay, I have stuff to work with. I should just use what I have. And my own personal philosophy around stash knitting and things like that has always been like, I like to keep my stash a little bit lower, just because it helps me know what I have, because if I start growing my stash a lot, I feel like I lose track of just what I have, and then stuff gets buried, and I don't have like a shelf or anything that I keep my yarn. It's just in a bunch of series of little bags. So you can imagine things can get pretty chaotic pretty quickly in my yarn management life. And so, yeah, I don't know. I definitely wanted to save up a lot of money to buy yarn in Rhinebeck, but I figured this was just an opportunity for me to pick up some stuff that I've never worked with before, or have never had opportunity to try. And so the first thing that caught my eye was this little shelf they had that was so sweet of all these Jamiesons of Shetland yarns. And so I got a couple of little balls of their Spindrift yarn. And so you can see here the colors I picked out. Very pink, very rosy. This one in particular really caught my... Woo! I dropped it. Hold on. This one in particular really caught my eye. So I really love just the colors in there and everything about it. This is the color Thistledown. So that's beautiful. And then I got this one, which is in the color Cinnamon. So my mom helped me pick out these colors. Initially, when I walked over to the Jamieson's of Shetland shelf, I was like, I know a project that's in this that I've always wanted to knit, and that was the Paul Klee sweater. And I was like, ooh, what if I got enough yarn to knit that? Like, that could be really beautiful. But that is quite an undertaking. There's a lot of colors in that yarn, in that sweater, if you've seen it. And so it requires a lot, and it's quite a bit to buy a whole sweater's quantity in all of these little balls to do that. And so I was kind of like, I don't know if that's really what I need to be doing right now. I definitely wanted to get yarn for a couple of different projects that I've had kind of sitting in my brain for a while. So I didn't want to spend my whole budget on just that yarn. So what I ended up doing with the Jamiesons, though, is I got these 4 little balls that I want to use for some colorwork mittens, because I've never knit any colorwork mittens before. And so there's a Purl Soho free pattern, which I can link here, that I'm thinking of using these for. And I just thought these would be some fun colors for that. So yeah, stay tuned to see what I get up to with these. And moving right along, I also happened to get some very exciting yarn, because it is yarn that will help support me in my quest to overcome the sweater curse, which my specific sweater curse is just not being able to knit anything for my partner. And it's not specific to just sweaters, but it seems like everything I try to knit for him, like I've talked about, is just never comes to fruition. Nothing ever fits right. Nothing ever vibes. And so I picked up some tried and true, I guess, Cascade yarns, Cascade 220. I think this is everybody's go-to yarn that's really affordable and, old, reliable. I've only knit with Cascade once before, and it was yarn that I had gotten on closeout sale at yarn.com. And I was kind of it was a fine experience, right? I didn't really feel any type of way about the yarn. This is their Heathers version, and it's this, foresty green color, these light green heathery bits in there, and it's worsted weight, and so I felt like it would be a really great sweater yarn for Aaron. It was really affordable too, so that's also why I happened to pick it up, because I was like, okay, I need to get enough yarn for a full-length sweater for him, and this was a really great deal. Also at Wool & Company, they gave you a discount, I think 10% or something, for buying their store favorites, customer favorites, because this is a very popular brand. So yeah, that was also nice to get a little bit of discount on that. But yeah, so I got this yarn, particularly in this color for Aaron, because he has a forest green pullover that my parents got him for Christmas, their very first Christmas that we spent together, and Spicy bit a freaking hole in the back of it recently, and that's his nice sweater that he likes to wear to work in the colder seasons, or if we're having a get-together, something nice, in those seasons as well. He likes wearing that sweater because it's a very nice put-together look. But yeah, Spicy bit it, so I'll have to mend it. But it just will give it not as a nice look. So I'm hoping to knit him a nice sweater that hopefully will stay out of the reaches of Spicy's little teeths and not get holes in. Luckily, side note, that is something I've noticed, is that Spicy will bite machine knit fabrics or different things like that. If we have a blanket that we bought at the store, or pillowcases she really likes nibbling on. As well as Aaron's jeans and pants, and just any, machine made clothing or fabric or textile piece, she bites it. She wants to chomp it. She doesn't eat it, luckily, and she's not as shreddy as some other rabbits are, but she just be boop, 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 boop. So there's little holes in the shape of her little mouth in all of them. But she does not bite knit stuff. So I've knit a couple shawls, right? I've knit a lot of shawls, to be honest. If you've followed me for a while, I knit a lot of shawls. And I knit a couple shawls specifically for her as little blankets to put in her little box in the winter times that she sleeps with and she cuddles with, and it's really cute. But she never bites those. It's like she knows I took so much time and care into making them, and she never ruins them. And so I feel like this will be perfect for me to hand knit a sweater for Erin, because Spicy, for whatever reason, does not want to eat my hand knit stuff. So win for that. And secondly, I got another sweaters quantity, but this time for me. And this is a brand called West Yorkshire Spinners. They're fleece yarn, and it's 100% British wool, and this is a BFL yarn. And as you can tell, it is in my colors. My color, which is chartreuse. I really love it so much. This is the colorway Fellside, and it's a DK yarn. And I really loved, I don't know if you can even tell, Beauty Guru hand is coming in. Can you even see the little halo? I don't know. But I recently did some hand spinning with BFL. As you can see, it's back here. And I showed you my little scarfy scarf that I made out of it. And I really loved the feeling of BFL as a finished yarn. And so I saw this and I was like, I guess I gotta get it. And I was very lucky in the sense that my mom was very gung-ho about supporting all of my yarn endeavors. She was enabling me. She was like, you should get this. And I was like, okay, Mom. I'm like, come through. No. I was like, thank you. But yeah, so I got it. And I'm not familiar with it, but I'm very excited to try out this brand, this yarn. And so a lot of the pom-pom issues that I have a lot of DK patterns in them, patterns that use DK weight yarn. So I figured I'll be able to find something in there to knit with this. Also, I've been considering knitting a cardigan because I've actually never knit a cardigan yet. Yeah, I have so many yarn, like knitting experiences to be had still. And so cardigan knitting is one of the things, and I felt like this would be really cute in a cardigan. I had seen, I mentioned earlier, my friend Linda Gray on Instagram knit a cardigan recently out of a yarn that was a similar color, and I really loved it. So I'm kind of like, maybe I can knit a little something like that for myself, because I know I'd love it and wear it so much. So yeah, that is another sweater. All the sweater yarns that I got, and me and Erin will be coordinating very cutely in our sweaters. Okay, so last but not least, y'all, this next one, you gotta prepare yourself because it's beautiful. I'm gonna take a coffee break to prepare myself because this will lead me into my whips. This is the last thing that I got on my little trip. And like I mentioned earlier, this was a fully mom-enabled thing. Fully mom-enabled yarn. And that is this beauty. I'll bring it closer. This is Aimee, Corrie worsted. This is the color Dawn. Need I say more? I'm just going to bring it up close. You don't even need to see it in my face, okay? It's so beautiful. So the story of this yarn. I obviously, spending any sort of time, online in the knitting space, eventually I was going to hear about Aimee, and I watch a lot of Gentle Knitters, one of my favorite podcasters, and I know she's spoken about this yarn before, and everything kind of coincided because I have recently joined a little knit along for the Jamieson Watts Best Fest with a couple of my other knitting friends and a couple of new knitting people that I got to meet already because we had a little cast on party for that. And in that design, James uses the Wensley worsted, which is also by Aimee, as the yarn in that pattern. And so I was telling my mom about my, knit along that I was doing. And when we happened upon this section of Wool & Co., I was like, oh my gosh, that's like the yarn. It's not the yarn because obviously he uses the Wensley. And this is the Corriedale version. But I was like telling my mom all about this yarn, right? I was like, I've heard so much about this brand. It's hand dyed. It's really beautiful. A lot of people say a lot of good things about it. And my mom was like fully in enabler mode, like, hey, like, do you want it? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I have stash yarn. Like, I was going to knit my best vest out of some yarn that I was actually going to frog from it was in a ripple crop top worsted that I knit that I made a couple of mistakes with, and it doesn't actually fit me too well. It also has 2 sleeves that are different lengths because I like got lazy when I was knitting it and I didn't want to measure anything. I was like, I think this is about the same length as the other sleeve. And obviously it blocks out, and they were like way off. So I needed to frog that anyways. And I was telling my mom about like what's frogging. And I was like telling her about stash knitting and like how I was trying to use up the yarn I have. And she was like, yeah. Anyways, do you want this? Because I kept talking and I was telling her and I was like, I shouldn't, blah, 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 And she was just like, listen, like, I know it's expensive, but you're graduating, call it a graduation present from me and your dad. She's very lovely, and she was like, you should get it. Like, this is a rare occasion for you. It was my first time getting to touch it. And so I was like, okay, well, if I get it, you have to pick out a color with me. Because I wanted to get something that was out of my comfort zone. Part of me wanted to get a gray yarn, and I was like, what a waste that would be to get something so beautiful in just such a plain color that I have a billion of. Like I have so much other gray yarns I could knit with. And then the other part of me, I was also thinking of doing something green, but I was like, once again, I'm knitting a lot of green things lately, so I need my mom's help to basically get me in a different mindset, like try something new, try something fun. And I wanted her to pick something out too, because she was being so nice in gifting it with me, and so I wanted her to have like some interaction with it. So we came together and both agreed that this colorway, Dawn, was the perfect fit for me. Whenever I talk about yarn and knitting, I get very blushy and I get very like rosy cheeked and very excited. And so my natural like tones start coming out. And my mom was like, it would look so good on you. So it like matched my little blushiness. And my friend Natasha actually said the same thing during our cast on party when I was talking about this yarn, because I just get so happy and I'm like nonstop smiling so I felt like that was so sweet, and that's such a sweet sentiment behind wearing a color like this. And I think it looks really cute with my skin and my hair and me. So yes, I'm so excited to knit with it, which I've already started doing. So I can show you my little swatch that I knit during our cast on party for the knit along. And it's so beautiful. I like keeping my swatches around. I knit in the round, but I didn't cut the back so I can reuse this. But it's also nice for me to look at to see like what the finished knitting is going to look like. And this is fully blocked, and isn't it beautiful? Like, it's so lovely. And part of me really hates that I'm like into the hype of this yarn now, because I'm like, this is so expensive. It's so, like, full disclosure, it was $36 a skein. I don't know, would y'all want me to start including like how much all these things are in my videos? Because I realize I don't usually do that, but I like the transparency, right? And I don't think yarn, like, money is something we should shy away from talking about. And when it comes to our yarn buying stuff, just to be like y'all, it's expensive. This is definitely not a yarn that's accessible to everybody. And so, yeah, it's $36 a skein. I got 3 of them for the vest. And I forgot what I was saying, but yeah, it's pricey. So I really wanted to like do my best with this vest to make it truly the best vest. So I took very much care in swatching, and let me grab it. This is what I have worked up so far. So I have done the ribbing, And so I think I'm doing the full length of the vest. You could obviously crop it if you wanted to, but I think I'm gonna go full in and try to be as honorable to the way it was written as possible. It's very scrunchy on my needles because my cord is a little bit shorter than the size I'm knitting for myself. But I want to bring it a little bit closer to show you all because I had a little bit of a debacle with myself around ribbing. So here's what I have done, right? So I have the rib. I actually did 3 inches of ribbing instead of 4 because, listen, I took my time with ribbing. I tried to enjoy the process and remember that it's a privilege to purl. But I also was like, okay, I'm sick of this now. 3 inches isn't enough. Like, I can't do the full 4. And I also was getting frustrated with it because, I will show you all. You might have seen on my Instagram stories, but I talked about how I was feeling really insecure about my 1x1 ribbing. And so it looks like I'm showing you the wrong side, but this was actually my right side. And once I started the body, I flipped it to work as the wrong side as now my right side of the ribbing, which looks a lot nicer, right? Much neater. And like I mentioned, I really wanted this project to be nice, and I'm also trying to be more mindful of how I finish my projects, the time and care that I put into them. And especially since I felt like, I just feel so pressured by such a nice yarn that I just want it to be as nice as possible and to fully show out all my knitting skills, and take the time, be patient for the nicest possible product at the end. And so with the ribbing, I did do some, adjustments. So online, I was Googling, how do I clean up my 1x1 ribbing because I wasn't satisfied with how this was looking. And a lot of people reassured me and they were like, I think it looks fine. It's part of the handcrafted touch of it. And I was like, ugh, it bothers me. I don't know. This project really awakened to me to that aspect of perfectionism that I have with my knitting, which I don't like that term because in general, I'm a very anti-perfection type of person with my crafting. I really like when things are a little bit wonky. I take pride in, things being made by my hands and looking like it, things are not always going to be perfect. But this project, just really sparked it in me. I just wanted things to look nicer. So when I saw my wrong side, I was like, I still knit it, so let's just flip it and nobody will have to know. So I had done this ribbing with, on the right side, I knit my knits and I purled my pearls through the back loop. And that was very tedious. So that's another reason why I only did 3 inches. And yeah, but I'm really, really happy with how the I guess the pearls were twisted a little bit, how that looks. So yeah, I'll be very excited to show you all the finished project when it's done. And I'm just very excited for our next little check-in with the knit along because this is I feel like this is one of my first real knit alongs that I've done, where there's actually a nice little community hub. We have a little chat and we do little check-ins with each other. And so yeah, it feels much more community oriented and very fun. So yeah, that is my best vest whip. Wow, y'all, this is a really long episode. So if you like long knitting podcasts, I hope you've enjoyed this so far. This next project is actually one that I brought with me on the road when I went to my parents. And it is, I don't know how I'm going to show this. There's just yarn balls everywhere. I'm just going to go ahead and make a little bit of mess. But it is an Udo sweater or Udo pullover by Orlan Souche. And here you can see the color work that I've been working on. This is the beginnings of the yoke. And I had a lot of Holst garn sitting around in my stash. And for the longest time, I wasn't sure what I wanted to knit with it. I had originally got these really foresty colors to knit my own version of Hello from My Colors crop by Aimee. And I don't know why I just really didn't want to knit that project. I really liked the looks of people's finished ones, but for some reason it wasn't like connecting with me as much. I still have the pattern, so I might knit it eventually. But yeah, that's initially what I got all this yarn from Holst Garn. And I, sat on it forever. And so when I decided to go on a trip, I was like, I want to bring a couple of knitting projects with me. Like one that's a little bit easier going for on the flight, and then one to keep me a little preoccupied so I don't miss as much of my knitting stuff that I left at home. And yeah, this is a really fun project to work on. Funnily enough, also, I got inspired to knit this from myself because I noticed, like, I think it was in my first knitting podcast episode or my second one, I actually showed myself, like, how I had knit a swatch of this for this sweater, and I never casted it on after that. And I don't know why. I guess I kind of just forgot about it. So now I'm doing it. And I saw myself doing that because I was adding chapters to all my YouTube videos. And I was like, oh, I should knit that. And so here I am. I'm knitting it. So I'll be showing y'all how it looks. It's a very fall sweater to be knitting in the summer, but whatever. I need more seasonal knits, but I'm also not tied to seasonal knitting. I'm just like, whatever happens, happens. Like, I'm gonna knit whatever I feel like it. So yeah, that's this. Okay, so we have reached the piece de resistance of this knitting podcast episode. And that is the progress on my stumble dress. Wow. Can you see it? I don't know. I can't see like how much I'm holding up, but hopefully you don't see my pissed sweat. It's hot. It's really hot. But yeah, so last time I checked in with y'all was when I had frogged this and restarted it, and now I'm happily on my way. I can gladly say it's a much better fit. I've tried it on a couple times. It's currently on this cord, which is very uneven, but it's like those silicone cords. It's this, I know the company Knitting Barber is very popular for these, but this is by a company called like Minnie's Pearls or something like that, that I got at the yarn stores that I went to. So it's currently on that, but this is what I was knitting on the plane, and just anytime I had downtime, I was knitting this during my trip because the stockinette is just, it's a breeze. It just breezes by. It's so chill to knit, and so I'm really happy with how this is going so far. And yeah, I have almost the skirt done. I definitely have more that I want to add to it because as it stands right now, it's very much like, it's a good length for me, but if it's kind of the vibe, like if I bend over, it's not a good length for me. So I kind of wanted to wear this to my graduation if I can finish it in time. So I don't want to flash anybody as I'm on stage. So yeah, this is ongoing, but I'm doing it. I can't believe that I've knit almost a whole dress. Like, doesn't this seem like so much? Like, I've done this over just the past like 3 weeks or something. And I'm like, what? Like, why is it so fast? But yeah, so if you were intimidated by the idea of knitting a full stockinette dress in fingering weight yarn because of like the time commitment or whatever, I mean, I don't feel like I've been knitting this like super fast in terms of like rushing it. Like I pick it up, put it down. It's currently on rest right now, but I felt like this is a very easygoing knit and it's so quick. And if you need a mindless project, yeah, highly recommend it. Yeah, it's gonna be so fun. I'm so excited to have this done. So hopefully maybe by next episode or the one after, like, in a couple weeks, I will have this done to show you. Whew. Oh my gosh. That was everything. That was all I had to talk to you all about today. I definitely have some spinning currently on my spindle that I could probably have said something about today, but I'm plying yarn. I'll show you once I'm finished plying it. It's just that golden yellow fiber by Kumasi that I've had on my spindle for forever. So you've probably seen enough of it. But yeah, that was all I had for today. All my whips and all of the yarn I got. And so yeah, I'm just feeling really excited for everything to come for me in the knitting world. Definitely going to try to not buy as much yarn in the coming months because, like I said, I'm still thinking a lot about that Rhinebeck trip. And I know there's going to be so much yarn there that I'll want to get. And it's probably going to be like the yarn store experience for me times 500 because there'll be just like so much there. So yeah, I'm just drinking my coffee. I need to go, y'all. It's been so long. This has been such a long episode. So yeah, I will see you all next time. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. And yeah, that's all I got. Bye.